Like and subscribe to Gillygabyte.
Game on, everybody, and welcome to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing the top 20 cards for the format of February 2023. Let's get started. At number 20, I put Enemy Controller. So this is essentially a side deck out primarily to out Ibly if you don't have a way to naturally get out of, whether it be like Tribute or you don't have to waste your Tribute, and also gain yourself advantage. It's fairly a cheap card, and it's unfortunate that it's just mostly kind of gimmicky and it's not searchable, so it may not be relevant too much, but I still put it on this list because I think it's got some potential there. At number 19, I put Super Polymerization. So Super Polymerization is a great card. The only downside is that it does require some extra deck space, so if your extra deck is too tight and you can't fit this in, that's completely understandable, but it is a great board breaker that can also be a great answer to basically crack big boards, and it cannot be responded. So it's definitely a good card, and if you have the space to play it, try to make some room for it. At number 18, I put Solemn Judgment. Solemn Judgment is a great card. It's mostly a going first card, and it does have its applications. It is a trap card, but having the ability to omni-negate many different effects in the game is very powerful. The only unfortunate downside is that it does go into time rules, and it really puts you at a disadvantage. So it has great benefits going game 1, sometimes game 2, but game 3 you shouldn't be playing it. Up next, I put Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. Very similar. It's basically an effect veiler. It does play into Triple Tactics, Talent, and Taskings though, so there are better options. It could come up, it can win you some games in time, but I still put it in here because it does have that extra benefit and application. Speaking of time rules, for number 16, I put Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. It is a great card to go into for time. It can basically steal you some games. Unfortunately, it is a card that's like only good for time, and it's maxi at home, so it's okay. There's better cards, but it's okay. On to number 15, I put Harpie's Feather Duster. Harpie's Feather Duster is a great card for anti-back row, and it could just completely blow out trap decks. It is unlimited at one card, but that kind of doesn't stop it from being playable. And if Labyrinth seems to get more play, or Eldritch comes back into the format, it's definitely a good card to have, especially with a card that I'll mention in the future. Another great card that's very similar to this is Lightning Storm. So Lightning Storm is one of those cards that does have that benefit of destroying back row, but it also can destroy face-up attack position monsters. It does unfortunately have the downside of you requiring to control no face-up cards on the field, so essentially turn 3 and beyond, it's not going to be as useful, but it can really bring you back into the game if you're hurting on that grind game. For card number 13, I put Change of Heart. Change of Heart is going to be a great card. Unfortunately, it is limited to 1, but there is a new card that was released that makes it much more powerful and much more usable. It can be used for a monster removal and can also really be used to swing yourself some advantage in the game, whereas you can take your opponent's monsters, use it for battle, and or even use it as like link material, and really great stuff like that to help you climb and gain advantage over your opponent. Number 12, I had put Dimensional Barrier. Dimensional Barrier is one of those cards that can be an absolute blowout. There's a lot of decks that kind of strategize into one main extra deck mechanic, such as Kashtira, which primarily will be his Xyz, Branded, and Tearlaments. Well, not so much Tearlaments, but in their fusion plays. But Branded itself is basically only playing fusions. And it's just a really great card. Can even counter like the Sword Soul matchup, because I know a lot of people are kind of getting back into Sword Soul because they haven't been touched on the ban list. Do keep in mind though that if you're playing a strategy that is like affecting you in the mirror, this can affect both players, so that is the one downside for this deck, or for this card, but it is overall a pretty strong card. For card number 11, I put Gameciel. Gameciel is one of those great cards. Now that we don't have to play the Wind Kaiju, we can go ahead and play Gameciel. It is the weakest Kaiju out of all of them, which is actually a really beneficial thing because we can give our opponent a really weak Kaiju, and we can go ahead and attack into this and break their 1 interruptions that they are a really problematic card that's on the board. It can only out a single monster though, so you have to pick and choose your battles. There's technically a better card in my opinion, which I'll talk about right now, which is Lava Golem. So Lava Golem is basically 2 monster removals. It's unfortunate though, because if your deck heavily relies on a normal summon, you have to forego that normal summon. But The trade-off is basically allowing you to have like more monster zones, because the Kashtira boards typically end on like 2-3 monsters, such as like the Arise Heart and the Shangri-La and Mind Hacker, so you can free up your zones and also really mess up their plays. Moving from number 10, let's go to number 9. Nibiru, the Primal Being, is what I put, and essentially this is a really strong card that helps you break boards and can really punish players who aren't playing around this. And ideally, if your opponent has to make a decision of playing as if Nibiru doesn't exist or make a suboptimal board. So this kind of really keeps every deck in check. Just be sure that you have a way to out the very large token. Number 8, I put Kashtira Fenrir. So this card is splashable in many decks and many different strategies. It can even search multiple copies of itself, so help you really thin out the deck and help out problematic cards. It's basically a Pinkertops, but better. The only con to this card currently is not many decks, like you can play it in many decks, but the price tag, is it really worth that big price tag? I don't know, you be the judge of it. Moving on to card number 7, I put Dark Ruler No More. So Dark Ruler No More is a really great card. It is almost unresponsible, but typically if cards have many main monsters that have like only interruptions from monster effects, they aren't really playing back row cards that can counter Dark Ruler No More. If successful, you can essentially play for free, but this card usually combos better with other cards to help break boards, and when you play this card you won't be dealing damage to your opponent, so hopefully you have that grind game advantage to really dish out damage to your opponent. Up next, I put Infinite Impermanence, and this card does not play into Triple Tactics Talents or Thrust, and it has that extra ability. If you set it, you can disrupt a spell and trap in the same column that it's in. It does, however, lose the hand trap ability if you do control a Nibiru, so that is a downside, but it's still overall a really great card. Moving on to our top 5, for number 5, I put Evenly Match. Evenly Match is a fantastic card. It is getting a reprint in the Trap Trick Structure deck, so if you have not picked up your copy, please go ahead and make sure you get it here, because this card is a necessary staple in the sideboard for going second. It unfortunately does have that same issue with Ibli, that if you do have Ibli, you can't immediately activate it. However, you are able to change Ibli into attack position and hopefully crash it into one of your opponent's monsters. So you'll take damage in the process, but hopefully you'll be able to also clear out the board. Moving on to number 4, I put Triple Tactics Talents as number 4. This card is essentially 3 ban cards in one. You hear a lot of people say that, but it really gives you so much advantage when your opponent activates an effect during the main phase. You can go ahead and either draw 2 cards, take one of their monsters, or shuffle back 1 card in their hand, gaining you so much knowledge of your opponent's hand and what they're playing or what they're about the follow-up play is about to do. It does require your opponents to play into it, but I think this format kind of still has a lot of interactions during the main phase, or any time during the phase actually. But moving on, this card is now searchable thanks to number 3 on my pick is Triple Tactics Thrust. So this card can search for any normal spell or trap, and that just makes cards such as like Harpie's Feather Duster, Evenly Matched, Dark Ruler No More infinitely better. You can max out on this, or you could even just like maybe try 2 and then max out 2, or almost max out on everything. I think people are mostly going to be playing 3 of these though. I hope it's just not too cloggy. Do note that the price tag is extremely high, so that is a downside of this. And in order to get its max benefit, it does require your opponent to control a monster on the side of the board, so then that way you can add that spell or trap directly to your hand to them activate it the same turn. So number 2, I went ahead and put Book of Eclipse as a tech card of this format, because Kashtira will be kind of the main threat, since tier limits are kind of now taking the back seat, and you do not want to be caught without Book of Eclipse when playing against Kashtira. This is a must-play card versus them, so then that way you can play for the format. It is mostly powerful versus Kashtira, and it still has its applications for other decks. Just be sure that you remove those cards or flip them face up, because when during the end phase happens, all the face up down cards get flipped face up, and then it gives your opponent's cards drawing them, giving them advantage that you do not want to do. So make sure once you play this card, break the board, and then go ahead and proceed and dominate your opponent for the next turns. And my number 1 pick for this format is Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. I really think that this card is going to be back in the format. It is one of the best generic hand traps in the game, and it's also getting reprinted in the Trap Trick Structure deck. It's mostly best paired with multiple hand traps, but I really think a well-timed Ash Blossom can really put an end to not only Rogue, but to some meta decks to really give yourself a great back and forth. It does play into triple tactics, talents, and thrusts, so do keep in mind that, but I think it's time that this card is back in the format. If you guys would like to see the full top 50 list that I created, please join my Discord, because everybody on my Discord did have access to this list early, and I will provide the full spreadsheet in the video description box below. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm out of here.